Gary Hart said that Fritz von Erich stole the Texas booking office after Morris Siegel died. But would the NWA have let a non-member like Paul Boesch book most of Texas anyway? Also, while I grew up watching Houston wrestling and know how much Boesch is loved, how did Joe Blanchard get away with running opposition to Fritz in Central Texas?
Well, now, hold on here a second, because this is complicated, and also Bruce Pritchard and I just did a Houston Back to the Territories release for Kayfabe Commentaries. So Morris Siegel died in 1967, and Morris Siegel was the promoter in Houston. Morris Siegel also, I believe, was involved in the other Texas offices, but we didn't cover, or the other Texas office, Dallas, but we didn't cover that aspect for the DVD we just did. But Ed McLemore and some other people were involved in the Dallas office also. Paul Boesch purchased the city of Houston from Morris Siegel, and I believe continued for quite a while to be a member of the NWA. If I'm not, that's a point we need to clarify. Maybe with Bruce. Somebody asked Bruce, did Paul still keep his NWA membership in 1967?
I think he kept it until the fallout, everything with Harley Race. Didn't he?
I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah.
Because he was always using the NWA champion. You could use the champion sometimes, even if you weren't a member. Watts did it, but still, he was an NWA member. But what happened in Dallas was Fritz got over so well that he got the chance to buy in, and he was one of the owners. And then I think when those other guys died, or old guy named Ed Watt was involved still when we were there in the 80s. So there were Bronco Lubitsch had a small piece of Fritz's office once Fritz got in for being a loyal guy. So I'm not exactly sure how the Dallas office switched hands, but it was peaceful in Houston. And as far as booking the entire state, did he say they wouldn't want Paul Boesch doing it? Is that what he?
I'll read the exact question again because there's a couple interesting parts here, and it's not exactly all correct.
Yeah.
Gary Hart said Fritz von Erich stole the Texas booking office after Morris Siegel died, but would the NWA have let a non-member like Paul Boesch book most of Texas anyway? Also, while I grew up watching...
Well, hold on. Let's stop so we don't get confused again. Paul Boesch wouldn't have booked Houston, all of Texas to begin with. All he ever had was Houston. If Morris Siegel had an interest... The city of Houston used the guys from the Dallas booking office, not the other way around. So if Morris Siegel had an interest in Dallas, which he may have had at one point, it would have been separate from Houston and what Paul Boesch was doing anyway. So that's what threw me off about that. And also, once again, I don't know how the transition took over in the Dallas office, but I remember somebody dying and somebody being bought out with some of those guys that we mentioned. So go ahead.
And then the second part was also while I grew up watching Houston wrestling and know how much Boesch is loved, how did Joe Blanchard get away with running opposition to Fritz in Central Texas?
Well, because Joe Blanchard was one of those guys that got over in a territory and settled in San Antonio, and there was always a San Antonio promotion. And I have some programs going back to the 50s before Blanchard that indicated there was the Dallas booking office, especially before the 60s and 70s when the territories really firmed up, just because they had a Dallas booking office didn't mean that was all the promoters were working for them. The local promoter in Houston, Paul Boesch, before that Morris Siegel, got talent from the Dallas booking office because it was close, but brought in their own stars. Same thing with like San Antonio and South Texas, Corpus Christi, Laredo, Harlingen. Those towns always had different promoters that would bring in some talent from the Dallas booking office, but also they might bring in some lucha guys from Mexico. When we were in Texas, or in Dallas in 85, the South Texas promoter had been Fred Barron, who had been with the San Antonio office, or was Fred Barron rather, who had been with the San Antonio office at one time. But you would go down there, but he ran the towns and he paid you $100 guarantee, and that was a fucking 900-mile round trip for $100 or more, or and just sent the office a booking fee. They didn't really own those towns, and then when they split up with him, we didn't have to go there anymore. So there was rejoicing in the streets. Because once again, the West Texas was the Funks, They were members of the NWA, but they didn't cross the line into the Dallas office, and they had their own crew of talent. So they supplied guys to, like, when Gory Guerrero, am I going into too much detail here? When Gory Guerrero was the local promoter in El Paso, and the Guerreros were massively over, but they would get their talent first from the Funks, and then when Amarillo closed down, then they started getting it from the Dallas booking office. But it was still their town.
Well, I think one of the themes here that he's kind of asking about, but not writing it in a way that really lays it out, is kind of the demise of the Dallas booking office as being a booking office for outside entities, because Bosch has a falling out with Fritz and stops using Dallas's talent. Right around that same time, Joe Blanchard has a falling out with Fritz, and now Southwest is its own promotion, not using talent from Dallas. And he starts supplying talent to Paul Bosch. So now Bosch and Blanchard are working together, and then they have a falling out. And Blanchard ends up running against Bosch in Houston at the Summit to crown his own world champion. He has a tournament, and that's when Bosch teams up with Bill Watts and gives him a small part of the office.
Right. But meanwhile, Fritz would have been fucking both those guys anyway, because right at that same time is when his boys got so hot that he was doing fucking incredible business. I mean, talking about drawing 3,000 people to high school gyms 12 miles from your apartment in the Dallas Metroplex on Thursday nights, and doing the stadium shows and selling out Sportatorium every week for fucking 3 years or whatever the fuck. So he would have fucked off those other guys. He would have sent shitty talent to Houston or San Antonio anyway, because they were doing so much business they couldn't handle it all. Obviously, because they didn't keep it. It lasted about fucking 4 years and they were toast.